Welcome to the very first episode of Ask an Inspector podcast. This is where you, the audience, get answers to all those burning questions you have wanted to ask your environmental health inspector. I am your host, Josh, from our Special Projects group, and this podcast is coming to you by Riverside County Department of Environmental Health, where we are always protecting the health of its people and the well-being of the environment. The topic for this week's episode is food safety. Thanks for joining us today, Adam.
Thanks for having me, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, the way this podcast works is the public gets to submit questions to us, Environmental Health, throughout the week, and we try and answer them all during this 5-minute interview. So I hope you're ready and have all the answers for our audience.
I'll do my very best.
All right, so the first question, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what is an EHS?
An EHS is an environmental health specialist, though most people commonly know us as health inspectors. For me, I work in inspecting restaurants and food facilities. Our number one goal is to prevent foodborne illness, but that is not all we do.
Yeah, whenever I explain to people what an EHS is, that's exactly what they ask, is about restaurants and food inspections. But obviously it's a lot more than that. I know you work in that program.
Yeah. So I inspect restaurants, pools, tobacco facilities generally.
You mentioned foodborne illness. What is that? What is a foodborne illness?
A foodborne illness is something that is usually transmitted through bacteria in food, and it oftentimes occurs when food is out of temperature for a duration of time. And so we're always checking to make sure foods are maintained either hot at the right temperature or cold at the right temperature.
And I know that varies, right, from different types of food?
It does.
So it's not just like one temperature.
Yeah, it varies between whether it's seafood, reheating foods, poultry, beef. There's all different types of temperatures that they need to be cooked to, but all foods, when they are maintained hot, need to be maintained at 135 degrees or above.
One of the questions that came in was, what are some common violations that you come across during a food inspection? Maybe we can add on to that, also addressing how do you fix those violations or avoid them altogether when you answer it. So can you name us a couple of violations that you commonly see?
To name a few, I can start off with just overall general cleanliness of equipment. A lot of times we go into restaurants and there's just a lot of debris that's been on for days, weeks, months. And I would go with refrigeration cleaning. A lot of debris can build up in the refrigeration gaskets. Also cleaning of shelving throughout restaurants. And ways that can be prevented is by just setting cleaning schedules. Start small and then move around to bigger tasks.
So for common violations, we don't see like out of food temp. Like that's not a common thing, right? Because then if the food's out of temperature, then you'd have to throw it away, basically.
It depends. When foods are out of temperature, if they're in the danger zone for a long period of time, then we will revert to discarding the food.
Yeah. Do you ever find in the refrigerator expired food that's just sitting in there? So I'm not saying that they're putting it out, but it's just kind of like in there.
We are looking at dates on when foods were placed in there and sometimes the duration for expiration. We are looking at that, but
Nice.
It's not extremely common where we'll find expired food in the refrigerator.
Oh, okay.
Other violations that I often see is as simple as the front door being open of a restaurant. And it seems very simple, but keeping the door open is really an open invite for anything, whether it's insects, debris, rodents, and those are all big issues that we don't want to have enter a food facility.
I'm assuming that's why they have those air vents on top.
That's exactly
what are they
why.
called? Are they called air vents? Or
They're called air curtains.
So give us another one, maybe one more.
Burnt out light bulbs is another common violation that I see.
Wait, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's actually a violation when light bulbs are burnt and are inoperable.
Where would those be?
In the preparation area, in the kitchen. These locations vary oftentimes either at the ventilation hood where they're cooking, there's light bulbs that burn out. Sometimes in the walk-in refrigerators.
So they can see the food they're cooking.
Yeah, the facility needs to be well lit, and without working light bulbs, that can't happen.
Okay, so the next question is, do restaurants ever get 100%?
They do. People, I've heard, think that we don't give out 100% A's, and it does happen. We do give them out.
So how many times does, like, say, a normal sit-down facility get inspected during the year?
About 3 times a year.
I'm just curious, have you ever had a facility get 100 all 3 times?
I have. It's kind of rare, but it definitely can happen. Nice. And I have had that in a few places.
Do they get anything special? Like, if they get 100%, does anything happen to them? Or do they get it on a list? Or
they get a high enough A. Our department does give out what we call an award of recognition. So we do have that, and people do strive to get that award.
So is that given out at the end of the year?
Yeah, it's given out at the end of the year.
Okay, so obviously this is a very challenging time with COVID, and being an inspector, you're in facilities, and then also like things are changing for those facilities. What are some of those challenges that you come across as you inspect the food facilities?
What I see is across the board, whether it's employees, managers, owners of restaurants, there's a big financial hardship. So we're going in there to do our job to make sure the facility's safe. And if we write up a violation, it may take a little longer for them to fix because of the financial hardship, especially if it's like a repair or if they need to replace certain equipment. So we do see that. And just while in the inspection, it's a challenge just to practice social distancing and trying to be as safe as we can while we're in their establishment.
I'm sure they appreciate that too.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the number one question that we got was, what's the grossest thing you've ever come across during a food inspection? So without naming names or even an area, can you tell us what the grossest thing you've ever come across?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I've seen a lot of gross things, but for me, it's got to be just cockroach infestations. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're large, but they're never okay.
Can you tell us how bad is it? How bad have you seen it?
The worst infestation I've seen inside of a restaurant was probably seeing over many hundreds of cockroaches. Live ones.
Yeah.
At one time.
I'm assuming like once that happens, the facility's closed.
Yeah, they're closed until they can resolve the issue, get pest control out there, and clean and sanitize everything.
Can't even imagine seeing something like that. I see one and I freak out. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine seeing a wall of them. Obviously, there's so much more you can learn about food safety that we didn't cover in this episode. So for more information, please go to our website at www.rivcoeh.org. Again, that's www.rivcoeh.org. That's all the time we have for this week's episode. Thanks again, Adam, for being with us today.
Thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And to all our listeners, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to submit your questions in the comments below for our next episode, which will be in 2 weeks, about vector control. So think about all those vector questions ranging from mosquitoes, rodents, bees, ticks, and heck, even killer hornets. Until next time, this is Ask an Inspector Podcast signing off.